UConn locks down Jim Calhoun. Now, will that stop the whispers? Next. Welcome to the Stan Simpson Show, a program about Connecticut people and compelling issues. Make it a point to drop in every week. UConn locked down Hall of Fame basketball coach Jim Calhoun for 4 more years and $13 million. But it likely won't stop the whispering about Calhoun's health and a looming NCAA investigation. We have Hartford Courant UConn beat writer Mike Anthony and WTIC AM sportscaster Scott Gray. They join us for a chat about the future of the program. In our second segment, we'll talk with Central Connecticut State University political science professor Paul Patterson about the politics at play in confirming Supreme Court nominee Elena Kagan. A liberal, she would be the 3rd woman on the high court. Then, folks, we'll wrap things up with our entertainment attorney, James Walker. We'll talk about the legacy of the late Lena Horne, Queen Latifah's new role as a movie producer, and the staying power of 88-year-old actress Betty White. But first, UConn locks down Calhoun. No surprise, guys, but took a long time to get here. What any language in the contract that you thought was telling?
To the delay, sure. There was kind of a unique clause related to the academic progress report issued by the NCAA that I'm told, it's a unique clause in that it calls for Calhoun to return $100,000 to a university fund should UConn fall below the requirement of 925, which it never has. It's not unique, from what I understand, for APR language to be included in contracts, but it's usually incentive-based. So this is a little bit different in that it's reversed.
Mm-hmm.
I think
UConn covering its back a little bit, covering its tracks.
I think so, and I think that's part of the reason why that's one of the things that led to the delay in trying to iron out some of the details of that. I'm sure it's something Calhoun wasn't 100% comfortable, something that Jeff Hathaway and President Hogan insisted upon. Ultimately, it's a done deal, and
by the way,
forward finally.
He's Mike Anthony. He's Scott Gray. Scott Gray, your thoughts on the contract?
Well, I agree with Mike about the APR clause, and I think that Jim was a little bit uncomfortable with it. It is not unique. Other coaches do have it. But I went through the contract. I read the entire contract. I went through it with a highlighter, and I highlighted every place where there was a clause that tied the contract, either incentives or penalties or whatever, to either the APR or NCAA compliance, and there were 7 such clauses in the contract.
APR, again, in layman's language, if a kid...
Academic progress rate.
Right.
It's a formula that was actually devised by an NCAA committee in conjunction with the coaches. The coaches actually had a final say on how they wanted it.
But it means what? We have 8 minutes to say. It means what?
It means, is a kid on course to graduate at various points during his academic process.
And it's different than graduation rate.
Right. If he's not, then Calhoun gets penalized, bottom line. So
if the overall APR of the program falls below a certain level, not necessarily an individual student.
It's an aggregate score for the program. A perfect score being 1,000, minimum being 925.
Complicated stuff. Here's something real simple. UConn is now doubling its budget for the NCAA lawyers. The lawyers are coming back for more money. What does that tell you? It was $300,000 last year, and that's another $375,000. The lawyer fees are going up. A lot of paperwork. NCAA is pretty dug in pretty deep here, it sounds like.
Sounds like it. It tells me that they're defending themselves vigorously, and it's taking a lot of time and a lot of money. Sounds even more so than they initially envisioned. What it doesn't tell you is what's going to come of it. It comes down to what the NCAA can prove, not what one might assume at this point. It's forthcoming. You just don't know.
Well, to me, it's a little bit of a red flag from the standpoint that I was under the understanding just 2 weeks ago from a pretty good source that we were very close to having the final ruling released. And now it appears that either they aren't as close as we thought, or maybe they have been shown what that ruling is and are now paying for additional defense against that ruling. So to me, it's a little bit of a red flag.
Or the lawyers are just ratcheting up the billable hours, right?
Well, they're known to do that.
Yes, they are. Now, how about this now? What happens, the heir apparent? When all said and done, Jim Calhoun's window is short now. 4 years, maybe less. Heir apparent. Who's next in line? One name that comes up now, this is all fluid, Tommy Moore, an acolyte of Calhoun. Quinnipiac coach, had a great year last year. Your thoughts on Tommy Moore? How's he positioned to be coach 2-3 years from now?
Well, Calhoun has long said he'd love to be able to handpick his successor, just like any coach in their right mind would love to do. And he's also mentioned Tom Moore on occasion over the last few years. He'd love to have Tom Moore sit in his seat when he's done. Could Tom Moore be a possibility? Sure. I think a lot of it depends on what comes of this NCAA investigation. A lot of it depends on what he does at Quinnipiac the next few years. And a lot of it depends on how much say Calhoun actually will have. There's nothing written into the contract that says he'll have a final say or an official say as to his successor. But Jeff Hathaway did go out of his way during the press conference to make note that he respects Calhoun's opinion, as he should after 25 years at a program he built, and certainly will defer to him in many ways and seek his guidance in this process, which will be a national search for a big name. I think with all things being equal, maybe someone with Calhoun ties might have a little bit of a leg up, but I don't think that would sway things too heavily.
Did Jim Calhoun want a clause in the contract guaranteeing him input? Absolutely. Would he have been more comfortable with the contract if that was there? Yes. But, you know, Tom Moore, like Mike says, a lot is going to depend on what comes out in this Josh Knockhamson, Nate Miles investigation.
Right. He could be clipped too, Tommy Moore, right?
But the Jim Calhoun coaching tree is very wide, very extensive. It covers the entire country now, and there are a lot of people that Jim Calhoun could input and would be happy with in succeeding him who aren't Tom Moore, if it came down to that.
Well, let's go. You had Steve Peichel over at Stony Brook.
Right.
You had Carl Hobbs over George Washington. You had Dave Lato at Virginia, who's now fired. You know, this is all fluid. Tom Moore is hot now. Next season, if Quinnipiac tanks, he's out of the picture. Right. And it's all very fluid.
You never know where anyone's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. You never know what the state of the program is going to be. You never know who the AD is going to be.
And if you're Jeff Hathaway, the AD, what AD wants to give that kind of power to a coach where you pick the successor? That's my job. I'm the AD. So it would almost be unprecedented for an AD to say, you pick it.
I think this whole contract shows, to a certain degree, Jeff Hathaway really reassuming control of the athletic department. But it's something he has to do right now. He has to make sure basketball is secure. This addresses Jim Calhoun through retirement, because right now, basketball is not going to be his major concern. He's got to concern himself with football, because the foundation of the Big East is just crumbling all around him. Football is going to be what drives the Big East, if it survives, or the University of Connecticut into the future in athletics, and that's where Jeff Hathaway has to go right now.
I wouldn't read too much into the fact that something wasn't put into the contract that gives Jim Calhoun official say on his successor, because what would that mean anyway?
Right.
If the contract stated Jim Calhoun will have a say in his successor, what does that mean? That means Jeff Hathaway puts in a contract, sure, I'll listen to what Jim has to say, and then, you know what, Jim, we're not going with your guy if that happens.
He could have as much say with the clause or without, and they could either say, well, thanks for the opinion, Jim, we'll let you know, or they could say, geez, you know what, Jim, that's the way to go.
He's either going to listen or he's not. And the contract won't prevent that or allow for it.
How about a soundbite from Jim Calhoun? We're 7 minutes in. We haven't even heard from the coach himself. Here's what he had to say about his future in this contract. Take a look.
And very simply, I love UConn. I've never said anything but. I think it's the best place in the world to be. UConn's still one of the best basketball programs in America, and now what we've got to do is, as saying that, now we've got to go do that with a young team next year.
All right, so he's fired up. How do you look? I read Jeff Jacobs' column said Calhoun looked great, health-wise. That diffused some of the whispers out there.
Full of fire, looks pretty good. I've come to the conclusion now the man's not ever retiring. He's just not going to go anywhere.
You know what? That's funny because my column in the Valley Press, which the people in the Valley have already gotten a preview of because it's out, opened with, "We'll never get rid of him." And I included a paragraph in there about how good he looked. I mean, this is as hale and hearty as I've seen him looking since before the last bout with cancer 2 years ago. And I was actually moved to, because of how good he looked, to ask him if maybe the medical problems in mid-season were because he was dealing with the combined unsigned contract as well as the pressures of the season. And
let's be honest now, it's much more stressful when the rigors of the Big East go on than when you're at home, relaxing, recruiting, playing golf.
But also having a contract that everybody is saying is just signatures away and it drags on for 6 months. I'm sure that had to be, although he said he didn't think it was a factor, but he just certainly looked a heck of a lot better than I've seen him look in a long time.
He did. He looked great. There was an equal mix of relief on his part, and he's full of fire. And what's interesting to me, too, is he signed for 4 additional years now for a boatload of money. Does that mean that we have to close our eyes and close our ears to the potential for his retirement over the next 4 years? Of course not, because if he coaches this upcoming season, and decides he's had enough, he's had enough.
Right.
And he can leave and he can take a
$1
position.
million buyout
There are
5
clauses
years.
in the contract that deal with that. But I think that one of the really interesting things about it is this is a contract that does specifically deal with his retirement.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, he has a Scott Gray clause there. He gets $1 million if he retires, or 5 years and $300,000. Only you get that kind of exit.
Well, I get a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I thought so.
But the thing is, because it does take him to retirement, and now puts him in a category where it's always going to be his program. He's John Wooden at UCLA. He's Bear Bryant at Alabama. This will always be Jim Calhoun's program now because it's in the contract. It addresses his retirement.
All right, so we have only 2 things left. Will be the NCAA and, again, any other health woes. The whispering campaign will continue, though, because that's the nature
I don't think so.
of recruiting. You don't think so?
I thought
in 30
Friday
seconds?
I thought Friday was a real good day for the University, for the University of Connecticut Athletic Department, for Jim Calhoun, for Jeff Hathaway. I thought it was a real good day. I think it should stop a lot of the whispers.
I'll tell you one place the whispering will continue is on the recruiting trail.
Right.
The man is 68 years old.
Yeah.
There's going to be negative recruiting. This was addressed in the...
Well, negative recruiting is something you can't get away from.
That's going to be there.
And it's going to take place.
Yeah.
All right, guys, bring them back. Scott Gray, Mike Anthony. When we come back, folks, we'll talk about the vetting of Supreme Court Justice nominee Elena Kagan, the politics and the pundits. You are watching The Stan Simpson Show. Don't go away.